Okay, I guess on me, Wendy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost there, and I think it's going. You're good to go, Gordon.
Yeah, sweet. Welcome to everyone. Yeah, so I guess I wanted just this episode to be more kind of like discussion based, and I have a couple of pretty simple things that can be done, and I figured can be used in many different ways, and they will be like how you apply them will be different and up to yourself, and hopefully there's some good ideas there. So I know the whole crux of it is based around like technology and analysis, but I just wanted to start with, let's see, can I share my screen? Yes, I can. I can share my screen. Okay, we're gonna go just to this one and share. So we learn in different ways, and I wanted to. So there are just the main ways that we could learn, but I wanted to talk about more of like a tactile way, and so this is great for, I find, for tactics and strategies, and it's quite simple. There are many options. So what I did was I got that actual pitch designed, and then I printed it off on a A1 sized, and then we got it framed with glass, and then just with just some simple wooden blocks, you put the numbers on the blocks, you paint them the different colors, and then you're able to like to get the players to move around. Look, when they talk about what our strike plays are, what they want to do, it's a much more interactive way of actually discussing patterns and shapes and tactics. I've seen it in even a simpler form, is like an old tarp. I saw someone had a tarp, and then they just used tape, and then they marked out the lines of the pitch on the tape, and then the added bonus of that was you're able to fold it up much smaller, and it's easier to transport.
Gordo, is this a type of role-playing game that you're putting into place here with the tactile learning?
Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yeah, but it's the how do we pin certain defenders? Like I always talk about that 2015 World Cup final, in that Australia were so good because they had Pocock and Hooper, and if you actually go through it like this, whereby, because in the final the All Blacks would throw to the back to make Pocock have to lift, and then they would run at Hooper. So therefore they had the next two breakdowns free of any pressure from the two best jackalers at the time. And when you do something like that, and you're actually seeing, or you actually have to move the block or move the player around, then you get to see where the space and opportunities are, and it's I found it to be really helpful, and it's quite easy to set it up and organize. I mean, if you want to go really rudimentary, just a joint piece of cardboard or something like that will help. And then the other thing I wanted to, so hopefully that answers the question. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the mental triggers, which I'll go across there. So we had an example of like a taxi play. And you'll hear people talking about taxiing in rugby a lot, and it's generally from like a box kick, and you want to taxi, or you want to push the chasers to the sideline so that the person catching the ball gets a clean catch. I know Saracens in England in particular are very good at it. You'll actually see England almost has a full wall in front of the person catching the ball. But I said we all learn differently, so I can talk about taxis and stuff. But when you are doing your game plan, I can show you. We'll go back, go to this one. So this was an example of just an old training plan that we did, and we're going to talk about this next. But you don't really need to talk too much about it. If they just see the picture, they know what the taxi is, and then ideally it triggers them mentally. And then using images like this, like we had calls like apples and pears and bananas, using calls and images like that, it makes it easier and quicker for it to discuss. And I really like this GIF from the Midnight Cowboy, because I know it was improvised. And I use that a lot to say, hey, look, so they're walking in a straight line, and we're not trying to hit anyone, we're not trying to get in their way, but we are just trying to distract them and slow them down. So simple images can really make a big difference. And now we shall go back to we shall stop sharing the screen. How do I do that? Sorry. I am. Oh, there we go. Stop share. So I'm back. Great. So any questions, Grant? Anyone else?
You
So
muted,
when-
Grant? Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so when you're looking at that and as a coach, and you're trying to put that into practice, actually, you know, players and humans learn in several different ways. And how do you use those different learning styles in order to make sure that they get it in such a way that they're going to use it in game? And then what's a good way to take that and put them under pressure so that they learn how to use it under pressure?
So how you test that is actually I think a lot of schools here use it's a program or an app called Kahoot. It's the remote quizzes. And that's a great way. Like when you're starting your week or your team meeting, you can have a Kahoot quiz done in 4 minutes, because if you do the questions real quickly, you're able to put images into that. You're able to put a little bit of video clips into it. So then you get to see, you can take a screenshot of, let's say, a game situation and say, what would we do here? So I find that's interactive, and then the competition, if you put them in their mini teams, it is good. If you want to test the knowledge and want to make sure that everyone's on the same page, you can do the like overnight Kahoots, where there's no time limit and it's all just about finding the right answer and really get some clarity on that.
Okay.
But it's just about triggering with not just. And I guess, I mean, I've worked in Germany and I've worked in Portugal, where English is not the first language. People could also say the same about New Zealand. But so I've had to learn to be able to get the information out clearly in many different ways, and this is one I find is quite helpful.
So taking this just a step farther, now you've got this system working. How do you take it to where you're allowing them to be creative with what they're learning? When you're allowing your players to be a little creative, to reacting to what's on the field in front of them and maybe putting different concepts together.
Well, I always have a phrase like the Express Yourself Award. We'll never criticize people for having a go. I know that's quite common and people talk about it all the time, but when you actually go and reward people for expressing themselves versus, like, I to be honest, I really don't like the man or the player of the match award, especially when it's voted on by the opposition, because it's generally just a popularity contest at most levels. But when you actually go and you reward them for whoever was the hardest worker, and then the Express Yourself Award, you're rewarding hard work and creativity. And it can be moments like, I remember in Portugal we had a scrum half came off the bench with like 7 minutes to go, I think. For some reason he ran around two forwards, chip kicked to himself, and then offloaded. His scrum half passing was terrible that day, but he got the Express Yourself Award. And you do that, and also when you are looking to, if you have a culture where players can come to you with ideas. So I find one of the big issues is players, they are seeing the game, or they're seeing their idea from their perspective. They're imagining themselves on the field. And then when they come and try to explain to the coaches or talk to the coaches about their idea, the coach is taking in like more of a helicopter or an external view. So then the communication can kind of break down, and the coaches might or the player might be frustrated that the coach isn't understanding what they're seeing or what they're hoping to do. So if you have it through like use of technology, and they can find a clip from a game on the weekend perhaps, or another one. If you have access to like the coach logic and clip draw and stuff like that, the players are able to go off and they're able to take the clip. They can draw their own lines. They can say, hey, I think this would work, or even if they just move another person, if this was there, this person was here, then we'd have this opportunity. And it's just to make more of a collaborative effort, because it is, I know what it is. I played under a coach. It was very frustrating, where I'd have suggestions and I didn't deal with it the best. The best is using that term lightly. So, but yeah, being able to express yourself and then just having a collaborative culture, I think is important,
So collaborative culture, that's a interesting way to talk about it. I mean, what do you think's important in building that collaborative culture? I know we're getting a little bit off of what your focus is on this virtual series, but I also know that this is something that's very near and dear to you. So I'd kind of like to know just how you create that collaborative culture. What are some things you do on a daily basis with a team to make that happen?
So it can be simple things. I remember we would have at the start of the week before training, or at a certain time, we had in Germany anyway, we had a coffee chat, we called it. So practice would start, we trained Monday evenings at 7. So then from 6:30 on, it was coffee chat where people will all show up early. I don't drink coffee, so that was the funny part. Yeah, we'd show up 30 minutes before, and it works. We did it a few times, and then it transitioned into, almost felt like a burden for the players. So it has to be more informal. But when you are in your daily training environment or the full-time environment, like for instance down with the Sabercats, it's a lot easier to have it on the schedule, and it's much more, players can come and go. They don't have to be there. The analysts can be there. Coaches are generally always there. And there's no goals. There's no, outcomes or anything. There's just, just have coffee and stand around and have a chat if you want. That's something that helps, and generally you get some good ideas from that.
So does that work within that disruptive innovation you were talking about on Texas Rugby Monthly the other day? I mean, sorry, plug there, not really meaning to, but plug warning. But I mean, you were discussing disruptive innovation, and you talk about how your coffee meetings got to be a burden at time. How do you notice that stuff and disrupt it so you get back to, maybe it's something different, but you're still learning and being collaborative the way that you intend?
That one I noticed because it was generally only the 3 or 4 diehards that were there, and they were sitting there. You can sense the energy levels. The chatter wasn't there. The jokes weren't there. It was just more kind of like, oh, we're here, Gordon. We did it. Yeah. So then I was like, So, and that's the thing I talked about, the disruptive innovation. We scrapped it then. There's no point in trying to tweak it. There's no point in saying, hey, well, what if I do this or that? Or if I bring cake out, will more people show up? No, okay, let's move on.
Not being afraid to get rid of what's not working now when it was working before.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's a nice analogy.
Gordon, early, I think on session 2, I think you had some questions from Rick you were talking about equipment.
Yes.
And you said like the solo shots and things like that. And he had mentioned he doesn't have a tripod, or he doesn't have a high shot or solo shot, whatever those are called. And can you just kind of maybe go into what your recommendation to him was? And why do we want it so high? Why do we want that video so high?
So if you are going to do the game video, you have to have the height on it so you can actually see the detail around the breakdown on the other side of the field. Because there's nothing worse than trying to zoom in on a ruck or seeing what's happened, and then a winger just casually walks in front of the camera, you know, or spectators,
or a fan, or an AR.
Spectators mill around, and ideally the cameras are away from the sidelines where things are not picked up on the sideline as well, especially if you're going to be sharing the footage with the referee. So yeah, you want some height on that. I did recommend that he get. I think he got a tripod. Yeah, you have to have the tripod if you are going to be videoing practice. It gets almost nauseous to video a game just standing there holding it in your hand. I know Jason Bourne series made a whole. a boatload of money out of it, but it's not,
Shaky cam.
yeah, it's not the Blair Witch Project, okay? Yeah. So yeah, just a basic tripod. And the thing is that you can get a really cheap one for $15.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to get fancier, you can, but like it's not going to break the bank, and it'll make a huge difference. And he also asked about the size of the memory cards. I mean, generally I'd use 32, but you can go smaller, but then you're going to have to wipe the card after use. And
Yeah.
just, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna chime in there and say from past experience, spend the money on the bigger card.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna tell you, you're gonna be happier down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I was going to just show you guys the statistical analysis, and this was actually did before I started on my whole journey and get to work for the US and stuff. So I was very lucky to be involved with that Texas All-Star, or those Texas Selects that happened in 14, I think. So I was involved with the northern team, and I started doing some analysis just based around numbers, and then I took it and then expanded on, and I took it to Dark and our club stuff. So just let me share the screen here. Go, and we can, okay, is that shared? Yes. So it's quite simple. And to be honest, I'm kind of kicking myself because I've gone away from this, but I do intend to go back to it. But it was quite simple, and this was just a D2 game, or I think it was actually a friendly. But so this was the overview, and a lot of these things aren't filled in. Like I didn't spend enough time to actually measure the time of possession, but that's quite easy. If you just get a stopwatch, every time you have the ball, just let it run, and then subtract that from the length of the game, and there you have your time of possession. But there are things like, let's see, I track the turnovers, but the real reason I was using this was more on a individual basis. So for individual feedback and statistical analysis. So yeah, I measured the number of possessions, and then the run pass kick ratio, and then handling errors, and then your meters made, line breaks, and meters gained after contact. So that was, and every player would get that tracked. And how I did it was on I had two laptops. If you have two screens at home, you can do it on that, and I just watched the game on one, and then just logged it on the other one. And I went into, I'll show you some of the passing statistics. The number of possessions passed. I wanted to measure like how often certain people pass the ball, and then whether those passes are effective or not. And this one is only like half filled in. But yeah, passes creating space versus bad passes. I think the thing that would be interesting though is the tackling page. So when we do statistical analysis, the analogy I always use is if you have two players, one guy makes 10 tackles, misses none. The other makes 7 tackles, so misses 3, but 4 of those 7 are dominant tackles, and we create a turnover and we get the ball back after. So that's the thing. As a coach, you have to decide on what your defensive shape is. Do we want to just fan out, make our tackles, and not really put pressure on it, or do we want players going out and actually forcing turnovers and mistakes? So this was, we looked at tackles made, tackles for loss, missed tackles, and then I also wanted to I was looking at the tackles after the ball has been passed, because I find it's a waste of energy unless you're taking a player out. But we would never condone that, especially with a referee on the call. And then try saving tackles. That I feel sometimes if you do just look at statistics, and let's say you look at a winger and he said, "Oh, he's only made 3 tackles today." Yeah, well, if 3 of them were try saving ones.
So you're looking at individual stats here. So if I'm a coach, and I'm a manager now, so I'm not really a coach, but if I'm a coach and I want to pick a couple of individual stats that are important to our game plan, while there's a lot of different individual stats out there, and a lot of what you pick depends on the game you're playing, how do you go about deciding stats are more important than others, for individual play? And obviously you talked about it here, looking at your numbers here, the forwards are obviously making more tackles than the backs are.
Mhm.
So, but looking at the types of tackles may be more important with the backs than it is with the forwards. Is that correct? Is that something you're saying there? Then how do you make that?
Yeah, so it's again, it comes down to the collaboration. There's no point in me doing what I feel to be the best analysis in the world, and then the coach goes, "Well, actually, I wanted you to look at this." Um, so it's when you work closely with the coaches about what are we trying to do. So we'll look at our defensive shape. How do we want to defend, and then we weight the statistics for which ones are more important. So if we're looking to do a really high pressure turnover based defense, like what Saracens played
Mm-hmm.
against Leinster,
Which
so
was
they're
brilliant.
yeah, it was incredible. Tackles behind the gain line is more important than like Leinster's defense was more kind of like a contain where they ideally don't miss any. They get two tacklers per player. And they're hoping to get turnovers through knock-ons or line out by going into touch and stuff. Whereas Saris are just so much more in your face and they're looking to smash you. So depending on the type of plan that you want to play, that will be your statistics and what you want to look at. So I have another one shared here. It's just about contact as well. And it's rucks entered and then rucks won, rucks lost, and then entered needlessly, and I think I categorized that by saying there was already two people at the ruck, and this is just for attack statistics. So we already had two players at the ruck, so there's no point in you getting there. That's a general kind of statistic that I think it can apply to everyone, and you don't need a specific attack or defense strategy to look at it, but that's how you assess the wasted energy.
Okay.
And do you clip these also and then share them with the players, or how would you package this up?
So this is actually this is before I had all the analysis software and stuff, and it was just this spreadsheet would go out.
So kind of on the players themselves to take a look and
yeah.
So one more question before I have to go, and I'll set this up with why I'm asking. So in 2003 at the Rugby World Cup, the USA kind of had an idea that they weren't going to be able to win all of their matches. So they made a determination to understand what match they could win.
Okay.
And Dan Lyle and Paul Emmerich tell this story. I've heard it at least a dozen times from between the two of them. And one of the things they determined was they could win the other team's lineout, disrupting the other team's lineout. And they had Alec Parker and Luke Gross at 4 and 5, 6'9", 6'10" each. And they would put out for every defensive line out, they would put Alec at the very first spot in the line out, right up on the 5-meter line, and Luke behind him lifting. And Luke was a young, strong man back then. Alec was sure-handed. And, when you've got a 6'9" guy lifting a 6'10" guy, you generally have to, you're putting a lot of pressure on the hooker to actually make a decent throw, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they won something like 70% of the other team's lineouts that way.
Okay.
Just by being disruptive. And that was something in that World Cup they won. When you look at, what you do well as a team, and you're going into a game and you want to do that better than you've done it before, because that may give you or it may give you a psychological advantage. What kind of things are you looking at in your stats to make that decision?
Okay, so generally at the start of the season, when you have it related to your game plan, there will be some non-negotiables. All the players in the team will know that if we are going to base selections around, we never base it around statistics, but they do add, they do help to it. Things like, and it relates back to, was it 2 episodes ago where I talked about the different roles. And so it relates back to your positions and then your core groups. So let's say for the back row who are looking to retain and regain possession, if you're giving away 5 penalties for off your feet, then it doesn't matter how many tries you scored or how many meters you made. You know, your core function is that breakdown, and if you're killing us, you're killing us. Versus you would hold a winger differently. Now, if the winger says, "Hey, won 4 penalties and I caught 5 kicks but ran into touch 3 times," then they've not done their job.
They've done the wrong job.
Yeah. So it's like I don't think I know it's, especially here in Dallas now, they're talking about analytics all the time because of Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys job. It's a much more fluid game than American football. So I don't think you can base everything off of statistics. I looked at it, and I actually did, even in that Texas, the North team, we were having a selection issue between 2 wings, and we looked at the numbers. One was incredibly fast, the other was much more shifty. However, the fast guy, it shows that he attempted on average 8 more tackles per game, whereas the shiftier one was just hanging out in the wing. And it came down to something as simple as that. Now, we didn't tell the player that, but we used it in a positive sense to say, hey, this is where some progress could be, and to look for like future selections. But it was.
So you went for the second story there. You didn't look for just how well they could finish.
No,
you look for the stats that could actually set them apart. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if you ever remember watching that Northern team. There wasn't much. I know the Blacks weren't involved, but there wasn't much competition from Houston and in the Central team. So everyone could finish. I think they scored tries for fun, but we were trying to make people actually better rugby players.
Yeah.
So.
Well, guys, I got to leave.
Okay.
Next time we do this, let me know a little bit farther ahead of time. I'll bring some other coaches in and make sure we have a little bit more discussion.
Sweet.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Grant.
Thanks,
Bye.
Grant.
Okay. So.
Well, Gordon, we've been chatting on email about some other sessions. Do you want to I think it's awesome. So do you want to maybe plug those now, and then you and I can work on details, but give us an overview of what you're thinking.
Yeah. Okay. Let me just.
Totally going to put you on the spot.
Yeah, that's fine. So the idea was I tried to, let me find the list. So, yeah. So I was trying to think of things that are not really discussed, or there's some blind spots around it. And one of the things I talked about, or would like to talk about, is like how you as a coach and your vision or your philosophy dictates what happens in that season. And in relation to from seasonal planning all the way down to like session planning, we're going to talk about how to create, because I'm a really big believer in games-based practice versus drills. But as coaches, we go on the internet, we see a drill or we see a game and we do it, but we don't understand the why. So how can you take an outcome that you want? Let's say, for instance, it's we want to work on realignment on attack. So how can we take that outcome and build something or create something new about that? Yeah. So we'll talk about that. And I don't have all the answers by any means, but we try and look at more the pedagogical side of things, and hopefully we can start generating like new ways to play the game, or new ways to practice or to coach it. I'll look at so session planning, that, and then how your vision and philosophy shapes the team, and how you should kind of like structure your practice and stuff. I've seen a lot of, for instance, I've seen some people have shown me their practice plans, and on paper it's great, but when you ask them what's the transition time from one exercise to the next, to where's that? Right. And they're like, oh, well, I'll just put it in there. And it's like, well, are you going to cut off the end of this one, or the other one going to start late? Yeah. And just simple things like that, where you know how to, you don't want to go from a line out or from scrum practice to, or surpassing practice to scrum practice, because then you need that warm-up time. So how to actually build a training session and how to get the flow of it right together. So that's
Well,
something.
even planning downtime. I mean, I haven't coached in a while, but when I was wearing my hat, I mean, that was, given that I coached girls, but letting them have even 8-10 minutes of just like, okay, go relax and then come back, like, and it was key in college.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's that. And anything else, or?
That's awesome. No, I think so.
Great.
We'll get the details out there. Thank you for hosting this, Gordon. And thank you for everybody watching, and look for more of Gordon in October, guys.
Yeah, sweet. Thank you so much. Bye now.
Thank you.